Hello, Ben here from CSL, back with another video delving into the playable classes of Diablo 4. In our previous video, we discussed the Barbarian, be sure to check that one out. In this video, we're going to go over the Sorceress, the second of the three playable classes that we know will be in Diablo 4, the third being the Druid, which we'll get to in the next video. No clue yet what the fourth and the fifth playable classes will be. Who do you think will make it into the game? The Bard, the Amazon, or some brand new class? Write your thoughts down in the comments below, and be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Nothing tells us you want more content than a growing subscription number. Now, without further ado, let's dive into the Diablo 4 Sorceress/Sorcerer. Yes, Blizz has said the game will also include the male version of the Sorceress, the Sorcerer. Please note, all this footage is coming from the Diablo 4 demo that was available at BlizzCon 2019. It is all alpha or pre-alpha footage, and everything in this video likely will change by the time the game releases. Now moving on to the Sorceress. While there was a Sorcerer in Diablo 1, the Sorceress was first encountered in Diablo 2 and is reminiscent of the Wizard in Diablo 3, focusing on the power of the elements to slay her foes, unleashing devastating fire attacks, freezing cold abilities, and destructive lightning strikes. These three elemental magics, fire, cold, and lightning, all have different effects on the Sorceress's enemies. As of right now, fire attacks burn enemies, dealing damage over time, cold attacks chill and freeze enemies, and lightning attacks deal AoE damage and, depending on how you spec, can also stun enemies. Where the Barbarian's resource was Fury, the Sorceress's resource is, you guessed it, mana. Now, mana mechanics are pretty straightforward. You spend mana on abilities and your mana regenerates over time automatically at varying speeds depending on your character's stats. Now moving on to the Sorceress skills. Like the Barbarian, the skills for the Sorceress are broken up into 6 tiers. For the Sorceress, this includes minor destruction skills, major destruction skills, defensive skills, conjuration skills, mastery skills, and ultimate skills. During the BlizzCon demo, players were locked into a single build, so we don't have footage of all of these skills. If we do have footage of a particular skill, we'll be sure to show you. If not, we'll be playing some random Sorceress gameplay. Moving on to minor destruction, we have Lightning, which launches a bolt of electricity that bounces around, dealing damage to multiple enemies along the way. Firebolt, which hurls a flaming bolt that deals damage and burns enemies. Frostbolt, which was in the BlizzCon demo, throws a bolt of frost that deals damage and chills enemies. Chilled enemies have reduced movement speed, and repeatedly chilling an enemy will freeze that enemy. A frozen enemy cannot move or attack. Lastly, we have Arc Lash, which deals damage by shocking enemies in front of you and restoring some mana. In the major destruction tier, we have Charged Bolts, which sends multiple bolts of electricity along the ground, dealing damage to everyone in their path. Fireball, which was in the demo, wherein your character hurls a ball of fire that explodes on contact, dealing area damage. Ice Shards, which sends multiple shards of ice at the enemy, dealing extra damage to frozen enemies. Incinerate, which channels a beam of fire, dealing increased damage over time. Chain Lightning, which unleashes a bolt of lightning that jumps to multiple enemies. And Frozen Orb, which unleashes a frozen orb that chills nearby enemies and expels shards before exploding into frostbolts. In the defensive skills tier, we have Flame Shield, which covers the Sorceress in flames, burning nearby enemies and making her immune to damage and negative effects. Ice Armor, which is a passive that gives you a damage-absorbing shield after not taking damage for a certain amount of time. Blizzard, which was in the demo, wherein your Sorceress summons a blizzard that deals area damage. And the last skill in the defensive tier is Teleport, which turns the Sorceress into lightning and surges you towards your target location, dealing lightning damage along your path. In the Conjuration tier, we have Frost Nova, which unleashes a torrent of frost, freezing nearby enemies. Lightning Spear, which was in the demo, wherein the Sorceress summons a spear of lightning that seeks out enemies, dealing damage. Ice Blades, wherein your Sorceress summons ice blades that deal damage and chill enemies. And finally, Hydra, which summons a 3-headed Hydra that deals fire damage to nearby enemies. Mastery skills include things like Firewall, which summons a wall of fire, dealing massive damage to enemies in its path. Nova, a passive that unleashes lightning damage after spending a certain amount of mana. And Meteor, which was in the demo, wherein the Sorceress summons a giant meteor to a target location, dealing massive damage and burning the ground for more damage over time. There was one hidden skill in this category in the BlizzCon demo, most likely because Blizzard didn't have anything to put there yet. And finally, we have the Sorceress ultimate skills, which include things like Deep Freeze, which encases the Sorceress in ice, dealing waves of damage to all nearby enemies and making the Sorceress immune. Inferno, which ignites an area on the map, dealing large amounts of fire damage. And lastly, Conduit, which was in the BlizzCon demo, wherein the Sorceress transforms herself into a ball of lightning, becoming immune, allowing you to zip around the map, dealing damage to everyone in your way. Again, there was a hidden skill in this category in the BlizzCon demo. Now onto the Sorceress talents. The Sorceress talent tree consists consists of 4 separate areas. The tree starts out with a green branch that affects all abilities, then splits into 3 separate branches, an orange branch focusing on fire skills, a teal branch focusing on cold skills, and a blue branch focusing on lightning skills. It seems like Blizzard wants Sorceress players to build their characters towards one of these 3 builds, creating a fire sorceress, cold sorceress, or lightning sorceress. However, I'm sure we'll see some exciting hybrid builds in the game that take advantage of unique affixes on weapons and armor. Alright, starting out with the green branch, we have Potent Warding, which increases elemental damage and resistances, Devastation, which increases critical strike chance, Align the Elements, which reduces the mana cost of your mastery skills, Precision Magic, which increases your damage over time while out of combat, attacking resets this increase, Inexorable Reach increases damage against enemies outside of melee range, and finally, Elemental Attunement, where elemental critical strikes will reduce your defensive skill cooldowns. From here, we're going to pop over to the orange tree, focusing on fire skills, which include things like Char to Ash, which increases fire damage over time. This effect resets when you take damage. Soulfire, which increases damage after standing still for a certain amount of time. Moving resets this effect. Blaze of Glory, which increases your fire ability's critical strike damage and causes burning enemies to deal less damage to you. Burning Resonance gives you a chance to recover mana when damaging a burning enemy. Devouring Flames increases your damage for every enemy that is currently burning. Endless Pyre massively increases burn damage over time. And finally, Conflagration, which significantly increases direct fire damage to burning enemies. Moving on to the teal branch, which focuses on cold skills, we have Numbing Cold, which causes chilled enemies to deal less damage, Icy Touch, which increases all cold damage, Cold Snap, which increases chill application, Hoarfrost, which increases the damage of your next cold skill after casting Blizzard, Frostbite, which increases damage against chilled enemies, Chill to the Bone, which significantly increases cold damage against frozen enemies, and finally, Endless Winter, which dramatically increases your critical strike chance against chilled and frozen enemies. However, your chill effects no longer freeze enemies. Moving on to the blue branch, which focuses on lightning skills, we have Ceaseless Bolts, which increases your critical strike chance every time you crit with a lightning attack, Overcharge, which gives you a chance to release 3 charge bolts every time you get a lightning skill critical strike, Convulsions, which gives lightning skills a chance to stun enemies, Stagger, which causes enemies to deal less damage after being hit by lightning skills, Crackling Aura, a passive talent that deals lightning damage to a random enemy in short intervals, Shocking Strikes, which greatly increases your single target lightning damage the more times you hit an enemy, and finally, Lightning Mastery, which significantly increases lightning damage against all enemies within melee range. Alright, that wraps up the skills and talents for the Diablo 4 Sorceress. Hit that like and subscribe if you want more content. If we missed something or made a mistake, be sure to let us know in the comments. Until next time, this is Ben from CSL.